if you're taking like a really disgusting poo or something like that, a little bit of mystery is healthy between the sexes, I think.
Hi, I'm Andy,
And I'm Roger,
and welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics.
on our search to find the middle.
That's fatphobic.
I don't feel war. I just order halfway to Siwa.
A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
I act as if God exists.
Put your masks on.
How dare you! You have stolen my dreams, my childhood, with your empty words.
Hey Roger, how you going?
Hi Andy, it's been a really busy day today. So Mum went away today, and so I had to put down our little one. And I don't know, I spend so much time at home and looking after her and really involved. But it's always so much harder for the dad to do the put downs, I think, early on. And the main reason, I guess, is that we're lacking the hardware. We don't have the fun bags, and it just makes it a little bit harder to that ace up the sleeve. Have you ever experienced that? I mean, I know it's been a while for you, but trying to put the kid down in the early years and early months really, and being at a bit of a loss as a man.
I think the flaw in the premise of your question is the assumption that I don't have fun bags.
Functional fun bags. You're forgetting about that time that we share a long history, Andy. That fateful night where we shared a giant novelty champagne glass. I saw everything.
I probably have a different experience to what you've just set out, because it was one where actually like breaking the association. So I think in some ways I would sort of almost reflect in the opposite, because in our circumstance it was getting used to me putting my son when he was a baby to sleep. It broke that association with sleep. So in some ways it was easier for me to do that.
With feeding, you mean?
Yeah. And so it's like when I'm putting him to sleep, it's like, this is the thing I'm doing, and I'm definitely not doing it that way. So don't even bother asking for it or, crying for it. Right. So in that respect, it might have been easier, but harder in other ways. Like the trauma of it means you sort of wipe all of those memories. I suppose that's the only way people have second and third and fourth kids. But
it didn't work on you then. The trauma must have run deep. It got me thinking though, right? Because it's just breasts hold such a high place in society. There's such an advantage, right? Like, not just for soothing infants, but just generally in life, right? Like, I think, have you ever done the thought experiment of imagining if you had breasts, or like if men grew breasts?
I just think the most salient question in this space is, why do men have nipples?
Yeah, well, I mean, scientifically, we do know why. We all start off as women, right? And then there's a special little spice in the mix, and we develop, male genitalia and things like that. But by that time, we've already got the groundwork for breasts. What have you been up to this week?
I was going to ask you, what's the most awkward experience you've ever had at a restaurant?
At a restaurant, there have been a couple in the whole kind of authentic Chinese experience, but I've got to say, the one that comes to mind actually is a story of a bloke that we went to high school with. He has a particular aversion to cheese, or he used to. And there was a pizza place locally that was famous for its incredibly dense toppings style of pizza. And I remember going to there, and the kind of owner that owned it was this boisterous, like stereotypical Italian person that it was part of the show, but I can't stand that shit. But it's part of the show that he kind of like roasts you, and he's a little bit obnoxious and that kind of thing. And anyway, we were there for a party or something. And of course, he was dreading it because he didn't want cheese, right? So I think he tried his best to ask for like a cheese-free pizza. And the owner just went apeshit, teed off on him, and like teased him mercilessly for the rest of the evening. And it got to the point where it was quite awkward. So that's what comes to mind. What about you?
Yeah, I recently went to a restaurant with some people, and it was, so how pretty much, or not all, but it's very common, like within Asian cuisines, that you order like, like whether it's an Indian restaurant or a Thai restaurant or Chinese restaurant, you order a bunch of dishes, some rice, some entrees, some curries, some whatever, stir fries, and you share them, right? It's like, it's a communal approach to eating, right? it's just a different sort of food culture, right? So I'm at one of these restaurants, a Thai restaurant actually, and someone's like, "Oh no, let's just all get individual dishes."
Wait.
And
Can I guess what the makeup of this this dinner was? Let me just have a crab shoot here. Would it be a woman with short dyed hair and white?
you got a few of those right, but not all. The main ones you got right. Yeah, but like I don't know how you go to a Thai restaurant generally and order yourself like a green curry and sit there and
Oh.
eat it by yourself. Like I just
Was it for dinner
I
or
don't
was it at
understand.
lunch?
It was lunch. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what it is though, Andy. I think it's the people are used to this, especially if it's a work related thing. People are used to the lunch special, and I think that's probably where some of that might
But
come
just to
from.
be clear, these were not like lunch specials of like it comes with the rice and the curry on the same plate. Like this was literally like the big bowl of curry to share and then another big bowl of rice to share. And this person, and it puts everyone else in a bit of an awkward position. It's like, oh, okay, well, right, we're not
Yeah.
doing the sharing thing, Yeah, and
Well,
it was it's just a bit awkward.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I say that with that racial profiling is that I used to work somewhere and actually it was quite remote. And a short walk down the road, there was this really small local village and there was a Chinese restaurant that had old school Dragon Den style Chinese restaurant. And you had your classics, your sweet and sour, Mongolian beef and all this kind of stuff. But we always used to go and it was a very Caucasian crowd. I was the only Asian person there. And they did exactly the same thing. They would never share dishes. They would always get their own portion of whatever they wanted. And I think it comes from being a little bit picky when it comes to Asian food. And also I think white people of a certain age have this weird thing about sharing food. And I've actually seen it in the older generation. And I think it's about etiquette, like it's actually quite rude to lean over to someone's plate and take their food, right? Like it's rude to be like shuffling plates around at a restaurant. It's a setting and you need to eat what's on your plate. So I think it comes from that old school mentality, I think.
Well, there's definitely cultural factors at play.
What you've just described has actually sparked a memory for me. And this will be something dear to your heart too, but bills, right? Like when you talk about awkward things at restaurants and I'm thinking here the stereotypical like work office lunch or something, it's the splitting of the bill and how different people have different tolerances for what is fair and what is not. Now, things have gotten easier with payment kind of sharing apps and all sorts of things. But, in terms of the middle of this one, do you fall more on the everyone just cuts it even or everyone pays, itemizes their meal?
I think it depends on the circumstance. So I have a story involving us actually. So
Oh shit, I don't. So I'm in trouble.
so about like I don't know, it would have been almost 10 years ago. Very different realities. So I had my son a lot earlier than than my peer group from school and uni and stuff. And
Yeah.
I remember going out to dinner one night, I think, with a bunch of our mates from school that we knew. You were there, a few others that we know. They were at this table at this restaurant, and like when you sort of go from like a dual income sort of household situation to a single income household situation, particularly, this was 10 years ago, so salaries sort of a bit lower, trying to make ends meet, and going to like fine dining establishments is not something that you can get away with within the budget, right? It just, your budget just does not allow it, so you kind of have to make it work, right? So I remember me and my wife were at this restaurant, and we were sort of being very deliberate about what we were choosing, especially like with alcohol and stuff like that, like being cheapskates basically, but not because that's our inclination, just because we sort of had to. And then I remember like we made all of these sacrifices in terms of what we ordered. So we deliberately did not order certain things. And then everyone else is like more disposable income, like ordering drinks and, oh yeah, it's okay. Yeah, more food's good. Bring it on. We'll try a bit of that, Yeah, well, it doesn't matter if we got leftovers. We're like, oh no, we don't want part of that. Then it's, oh, you all don't mind if we just split the bill, do you? It's like, oh, fuck. So we're like, so you say yes, you say that's fine, we'll split the bill, because you kind of, well, what do you say? It's like, it's a bit awkward, right? So in that kind of setting, I think when like, taking into account like and being sensitive to sort of other people's sort of financial circumstances, but then like I think if it's like people of sort of equal means and you're all just having a good time. No one's sort of taking the piss and ordering like bottles of Grange or anything like that. Then I think the preference would be to just split it equally as a matter of just not making money a thing, like a thing that people obsess over.
I actually remember that dinner. I was wondering what you were going to talk about. But we did actually, I remember we spoke about the situation quite soon after, right, and had a laugh about it. And to me, that story really speaks to some of the other episodes and other things where it's actually very, very hard to be respectful and empathetic of people when you haven't experienced it yourself, right? Like that situation shows that none of us would have done that on purpose, but we just didn't think about it, right? We were careless. And kids are exactly one of those things that until you've really been through it, it's just a totally different mindset, right? On so many different levels. And because we weren't there yet, we just didn't even consider it, right? Like we would have seen you as in exactly the same situation as us at that table, but obviously very the inner workings of your life at that point were very different. And it makes me think of, other things we've been speaking about, like representation or women or diversity, that yeah, it is really hard to like put yourself outside of your current experience sometimes, when you just don't have that experience. Sorry to interrupt the podcast. Andy and I have really enjoyed doing this, and while we don't want your money or anything like that, it's been great to see the number of our listeners grow since we kicked things off last year.
The best way for us to reach more people is word of mouth. So if you'd like to support us, then we'd be really grateful if you could share it to a friend or someone that you think might enjoy the podcast.
We know there's a conversation for everyone, so please pick an episode that you think that they'd like and share away.
That ends our shameless plug, and we'll return you now back to the episode.
All right, well, what do we talk about today, Andy?
Well, this is a little bit of a different topic from what we normally discuss on the middle, and I don't think there's like a middle to find necessarily on this one. But for a big part of COVID, none of us were allowed outside the country, let alone it being sort of an appealing thing to do. But now, of course, borders have reopened, there's lots of good deals going on. And I don't know the last time you were overseas, but yet some years since I've been abroad and we're about to go overseas ourselves. So we thought we might just have a bit of a chew the fat session on the topic of travel. It's one of those things that we all kind of love, but we have our own takes on how it should be done and what a good travel life looks like.
I don't know about that comment about it's something that everyone loves. There's definitely good travelers and bad travelers in my experience. I mean, how would you define yourself as a traveler? Like the kind of style, when you approach it?
You know how like life is full of like peaks and lows, right? Travel's like the peak, right? It's one of those peaks. So, you need to kind of, in my mind anyway, you don't normally travel. Most of the time your life's pretty monotonous, right? Getting up, going to work, all that sort of stuff. So if you're having a holiday and you're going overseas, you should do it right, which means you should make that like holiday as memorable as possible. So, kind of the idea of, you're going to take 2 weeks off and you're going to go an hour and a half up the highway to and stay in some shitty motel. And that's your holiday. That doesn't work for me, even though it's probably like good value. It's probably you save some money. It's a lot cheaper than flights and 5-star hotels and all that sort of stuff. But, when you're like on your deathbed in your 80s or 90s, you're not going to really remember it, are you?
Yeah. Andy, I wish I could fight you on this one, but I'm exactly the same. I'm actually go even further than that. I really want to embrace this idea of being a tourist as well. Like I actually want to do it in a luxe way, but I want to be a tourist. Like, people that often say, I don't really want to, do the major things. I want to live like the locals and I want to kind of really immerse myself in the culture. I'm like, no, I don't want that. I don't want some kind of working holiday. I want the tourist luxury version of the country, right? I'm here for a good time, not a long time. And so I don't want to kind of like eat at the local place that will give me diarrhea just to have a story kind of thing. I want to go to the place.
Yeah, so I probably a little bit different to you there because I definitely agree with like the luxury side of things. So, where that's part of that, like remembering the experience. But then to your point then before around kind of the more like the seedier sides of things, I like seeing that too, because that's like part of the experience. Like you remember that.
Yeah, I'm all for that. But like, I still stand to my comment that the people that are like, I want to avoid everything that's famous about a city and do the local version of everything. I'm not for that, which is slightly different from what you're saying. I mean, the reason I bring this up and I asked you what's your style of traveling is because I have a lot of memories set in my mind from when you first had your boy, right? And I remember that at the time, and you kind of living in Canberra and we were still in Sydney, and you know, like you said, life's about punctuated by the highs and lows, right? And I remember every time you came to visit us or in Sydney, you would always want to get like a 5-star hotel to like, just for a night to really you know, live it up, and you're really craving that kind of that other end of life while, you know, dealing with the day-to-day realities of you know, like a newborn and a young infant. So I always have this memory of like you being a bit of a hotel hunter, which probably moves us on to something adjacent, which is I also associate you with frequent flyer hacks and hotel hacks, right? So I want to talk about that a little bit as well.
I think the problem with associating me with like frequent flyer hacks is like I'm in like the eighth division on this space. There's like whole communities and like there's Facebook groups and online communities and website around like frequent flyer hacks. So most of us, if you've flown before, you're either like the member of Velocity for Virgin or Qantas frequent flyers, or you know, different airlines. Chris Flyer for Singapore Airlines is, you know, whatever the airline that you most use, and they've got these frequent flyer programs. So you get on a plane and you get some points if you fly a certain amount of miles or whatever. And you know, most people kind of have some engagement with these programs, and then you know, they might earn some points. They might even not even know that they've got a points balance, but then
Yeah.
you know, so there's like this tacit sort of engagement in it, but not really active engagement. But there's whole communities who dedicate like serious brain power to like understanding all of the little pockets of opportunity in these programs. And it's it's like a whole cult, really. I'm sort of like a little bit like exposed to that, and I kind of, you know, but they're like people who are like really, really into the cult, much more than I am.
Well, I mean, like you got a foot in the door, I suppose, at least. I actually really love it. I love the idea of, you know, because frequent flyers and all these kind of loyalty and reward points are like these own little ecosystems, right? And I love this idea that someone's there trying to game the system and trying to do, you know, get the best and then share that knowledge, right? Like it's a very Asian thing. I've got a feeling that these communities are not Asian. I don't know.
But yeah. No, I think it's like coupon collecting, right? So like there are people who can tell you the dollar value of like a point based on like what you can spend it on. So I guess the other added dimension here, like there's like a slightly different concept called like status credits, right? So you get frequent flyer points if you know, all of us will get if we get on a plane and we're a member of one of these programs. But like status credit is a slightly different concept. So you don't use status credits to redeem for future flights like you would frequent flyer points, but status credits, it kind of, you accumulate them the more you fly. And the way you get awarded status credits is a little bit different to frequent flyer points in that it depends on the leg and like how many legs you do, and it's not quite mile for mile. It's like more like segments and things like that. But the benefit of having status credits is it gives you all these extra benefits. Like it gives you more access to redeem flights that aren't available to other people. It
and
gives
lounges
you
and things, right?
access to lounges. It gives you priority upgrades and all these extra benefits, right? So one of the best things that like I've seen on these groups is every now and then like Qantas will have what's called like a double status credits offer, where they'll give you twice the normal amount of status credits. So what happens is as soon as one of these offer periods gets announced, there's like a massive race for everyone to book these like just crazy itineraries, because if you book like, let's say a flight from say Sydney to Perth, right?
Yeah.
If you book that flight, not direct, but like, you know, maybe it stops like Sydney, Melbourne, and then Perth. You don't just, you actually get like status credits for each segment. So what happens is you get these like specialist travel agents who know where all of the really good sweet spots are. And so one of the like most popular ones is to fly from Sydney to Noumea. And what they do is they book you this crazy route. So probably something in the like, don't quote me, but something like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Gold Coast, back to Melbourne, and then Noumea. And then these people will do that and return the same leg on the same day. They don't even do anything in Noumea. They're just literally on planes just to get the double status credits and take advantage of the offer.
Well, it was really the only way sometimes, if you're not doing long haul international travel and business class travel, to achieve, you know, gold status and get entry to the lounges. But I mean, for me, right, like I have a problem with the lounges because I think that I just really hate it as someone who sees it as a real elite kind of class thing. I just think I've just always hated it. And even when I have been able to access it through work and things like that, I've never enjoyed it. It's like has the illusion of something that is exclusive, but it's just awful when you're in there, right? Like it's like this shitty kind of stuff from like the 90s and vinyl lounges and weird Aboriginal dot painting on the wall. You got your crappy little like Bain Marie of pasta that everyone descends on like zombies once they replace it. I think it's really awful.
But see, I think what you're missing there is that you're not seeing the kind of lounges that these travel hackers are getting into, right? You're
Like the
seeing
Singaporean international one or whatever.
Yeah, like no, but even like in Australia, right? You're seeing, let's say, the Qantas Club, right? These like frequent flyers would see that as pretty much the local RSL, right? But these people are going to
What's above that?
Okay, so well, for starters, like you've got like the business class lounge, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah, I've been to that too, though. But that's not.
Yeah, so but it's better. It's better. We can talk about international in a sec, but in Australia, you've got something called the Chairman's Lounge. So to be in like the Chairman's Lounge, you need to be
An actual
selected. You can't. It's not.
Oh, it's like an invitation only kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you're, maybe a senior politician or you're a CEO of a big company that spends a lot of money with Qantas or whatever, you'll get an invitation to the Chairman's Lounge or your membership to go to the Chairman's Lounge. But there's like even within these like lounges, there's like a hierarchy, right? And then you have first class lounge and stuff as well. Just while we're speaking of lounges, I wouldn't mind reflecting on one of the experiences I had in Singapore. So Singapore Airlines is probably, like one of the top tier airlines in the world, right?
Yeah.
And people in Singapore really take this stuff very seriously as well. And Changi Airport in Singapore is, it's pretty new, modern, and pretty slick. So there was an occasion that all through points was able to book, first class ticket with Singapore Airlines. And through that, I got access to something called the dining room. So
God.
This is like, now there's probably like another layer above this that they don't even make public. But what happens is to get to the dining room, you have to go through, first of all, like just the general, like, RSL club style lounge that they have. Then you go through that barrier. Okay, and it looks a bit chaotic, like you just said. Then you go to the next one, which is like the business class lounge, right? Which is a step up, right? It's better. But again, it's just the business class lounge. And then they take you through to get through that to get to the first class lounge. And the first class lounge is like next, like again, like a step up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the food gets a bit finer, right? There's more space, fewer people, all that sort of stuff, right? But then there's like the next level up, and this is the dining room. You get like a menu, you order what you want. It comes to you like it's a 3-course meal.
Wow.
It's personalized service. It's basically a restaurant.
How was the food?
I think I had a hamburger and fries, but
I was about to say, why? Well, in that kind of thrilling description that you just gave, why do they make you walk through like all the lesser like
it's just a
plebs to get
status
to
thing,
yours?
right? I think it's just to like double down that like you're better than everyone else, right?
Do they
You've
have
reached
like
the
a little
pinnacle.
Sherpa that kind of like fends off the plebs from you?
Yeah, basically, like they escort you. Like when you think about it, like logically, that doesn't make sense, right? It's a bit like an IKEA store, right? There's no need to like walk all the way around the couch section and the bed section and just to get
Yeah.
to the dining chairs, right? But they make you do it because it's part of the experience, right?
But don't you see what I mean there, Andy? Like it's such a recreation of like a weird class system. Like,
Oh, yeah.
but doesn't it feel really icky? Like,
No, because that's why people do it. Like that's why people get into this stuff, right? It's all about like I'm more superior to everyone else. That's like what it comes down to. Like and that's the irony, right? Because all these people engaged in these communities, they can't actually afford these flights. People who like genuinely are of that higher status, they just buy the flights and they don't waste their time on this stuff, right?
yeah, but they probably take it for granted too, right? It's nothing to them.
But that's like part of the whole like highs and lows. You just have to get like a little essence of what it is. So, like obviously it's very hard to get like 2 first class tickets on a flight. So, if you're traveling with a family, especially, it's a pretty hard sell to say, hey, I'm going to fly first class, but you and the children are going to like stay in cattle class, right? And you're going to be happy with that, right? You just be happy that you're traveling, right? So, but there's ways around that. Like you can swap the ticket. So you take the way, to the destination and you swap on the way back, right? And that's how you can kind of make it work. But that's okay because you've had the experience.
Yeah, I mean, well, I've never been first class ever, right? So I obviously don't know what the top tier is, but I do remember growing up when I was a kid. for some reason or other, my dad had his ticket back from Malaysia bumped to business class, right? So the family was in cattle class and he had a business class ticket. But of course, being, chivalrous, he gave it to my mum. And so my mum was sitting in business class. And I remember like they had that little curtain thing and we could go and visit her. And so I remember walking in to see her and it was dining time. And they opened her little thing and it had like a little cloche on top and had a roast chicken breast still on the crown, like on the bone, right? Presented quite nicely. I was like, oh yeah, that looks all right. And then I went back to economy class, and then by the time I got there, they were serving the same meal time, and it literally was just the 2 drumsticks that came from came from the chicken. And the irony of that story is that Asians hate chicken breast because they always think it's dry. They want the dark meat, which is the drumsticks. So you didn't do enough research there. But I always remember that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good way to travel like once in your life. So I wouldn't pay for it, but yeah, it's a good experience.
So it doesn't ruin it for you though.
Look, another way of putting it, right, is let's say it costs around 10,000 Australian dollars to fly business class from Sydney to Europe or Sydney to America at the moment, right? It used to be a little bit cheaper before COVID, but at the moment, prices are quite high. So like if you're thinking like, is that like a good investment? Is that like a good way of spending money, right? Like it's pretty hard to justify because I mean, $10,000, like, I mean, we're flying economy for $1,200, right? So
Yeah.
return. So it's like, that's like $8,800 that you could theoretically go and splash out on like top-notch hotels and, like think of what you could do with that much money to give you the equivalent experience of just having a little bit more legroom for 14 hours.
Mate,
You know what I mean?
if you took that $8,000 and opened the 23 credit cards with the points deals that they're talking about, who knows what kind of dining room awaits you.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't recommend it unless it's someone else paying for it or points.
Saying all of that, you've experienced the very, very top echelon of, well, what we believe the top echelon might be of travel. Would you trade that all in for just a private jet?
No.
You want the song and dance.
No, because like the problem with like private jet is you don't have anyone to compare yourself to on the actual plane, right? Like
But you don't have to deal with people.
No, but that's not why you do it. You do it because like there's like 100 people that have to walk past you jealous of you. That's 90% of the benefit, right? It's like your ultimate opportunity to be like to just
a big shot.
Absorb that envy that everyone around you has, right? And feel good about how much better your experience, even though it's still shit, actually. Like at the end of the day,
that's what I mean. Private jet would be so much better.
Yeah, but I don't know it is.
You wouldn't have to go through security and all that.
Either way, you're still like sitting in this cramped. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like a first class suite is like a lot more spacious than an economy seat, but like at the end of the day, you're still like sitting in this monotonous space for like however long the flight is, and whether it's a private jet or it's a
I think it's more the fact that you don't have to deal with other people or the same kind of security.
See, I think on this occasion, like the people factor isn't necessarily the problem. In fact, it's almost like plays into why some people kind of feel a bit smug, on at that end of the plane, right?
Right.
I wouldn't mind just like pivoting off how indulgent and pretentious I am in terms of travel, but I'm going to move from that and get onto Airbnb because I think you're a fairly experienced Airbnb user. Certainly, I think you've used Airbnb a lot more than me. Tell us some of your experiences using Airbnb and why you keep returning to the old favorite.
Yeah, I mean, Airbnbs are great for big families and stuff. I think that's the other thing. For finding a special property and finding big houses where you can pack in relatives and other things with people. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I really love that experience of stepping inside someone's passion project. It's very it is very expensive still, but I think that Australians especially have this real love of grand designs and the home improvement project and everything. So getting to see like a really cool property or getting to experience it for a couple of days or a week or whatever it is, I think is very appealing. And there's not really, if you think of the old school method of getting like hotel rooms, adjoining hotel rooms or things like that, but for a similar price, you can actually get a whole 6-bedroom house or something with your own privacy and your own kitchen and pool, whatever it is, right? Like there's just no comparing, in my opinion, right? Like I think that for the right location, outside of cities and things like that, I never actually used Airbnbs within city centers and things like that. It's always usually more suburban destinations. But yeah, I just don't think that you can compare to when you have to travel as a family.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely pretty hard to, or it gets pretty pricey once you have to start booking multiple
But
rooms.
just a
Like,
shit experience as well. Like
yeah,
being separated like that, like it actually makes me wonder because we went on this really big American trip when I was probably about 11 or 12 with my mum's family and my cousins and things and our family, and we did it old school, like hotel motels all adjoining rooms together and stuff like that. And it makes me wonder nowadays whether in Airbnbs like how different would have been, like to have like a big property for ourselves. It would have
if
been
you
really
were
cool.
traveling, just you and your partner, would you go hotels or
Yeah,
Airbnb?
hotels.
So why hotels over Airbnb in that setting?
Because I think like when I'm not in kid mode, I want the kind of I want the polish. Like I want to feel like the people that are serving me are doing it in a professional manner, not that I'm invading someone else's home, right? Like I don't want to see their pictures on the wall. I don't want to like I don't want to have to worry about what I'm doing in the room. I want to be like an anonymous, faceless guest that is paying for service and time, right? Like I want to be called sir. Like I just think that when I'm not in kid mode, I prefer the experience of a hotel, right? Like the facelessness of it all, the exchange of like I'm paying this money and you're calling me sir. Like, I like that.
What's your position on those bathrooms? Usually in Asia with the big windows.
Oh, like the see through. There's no
Yeah.
separation.
So you can see your partner taking a shit.
Well, like if there's similar ones in the Crown hotels in Melbourne, it's a little bit less invasive than the Asian model, but you can see like a very very light frosting, and you can see like the top half, right? So you obviously don't see your partner having going to the toilet, but you'll just see that you can still see their heads, right? So it's like a half half. I think that it's not ideal because because look, like I'm not a prude about that stuff, but if if you're taking like a really disgusting poo or something like that, you can't. I mean, there are limits. Like a little bit of mystery is healthy between the sexes, I think. Like and there's a time and place, right? There's a time and place for that. But when you're in a nice 5-star hotel, you can fart and poo and wee in front of each other at your house, right? Like and doing that while while your kids barge in and stuff. Like you want the opposite of that in a 5-star hotel. I want to go into like a soundproof like room padded with red velvet and like you can fart and poo as loud as you want and then come out like nothing ever happened. That's what I want.
I do think it's a little bit like in hotels, like trying to just do things a little bit differently to
Yeah, be too
what you'd have at
trendy.
home, and it's just like one of those wow factor things that's kind of, well, we can't really have like a glass wall anywhere else than between, like, the only rooms are the bathroom and the, like, where people sleep, so we'll just do it there. And like, I don't know, I'm trying to think like what's the logic, like what's the actual rationale, like
Yeah,
I did think whether it's so you can watch TV from the bathtub. Like that seems to be the only logical reason I can come up with, but I'm not sure if that's the reason or
no,
not.
I think it's like what you said. It's just to be different, to be trendy, like a different design, right? And
Feng shui, maybe? Do you think it could be feng shui?
people love open plan. Let's just have no walls, right? Like let's just fucking have
Well,
one big room.
I actually that reminds me of some of the early when you see like motels from like, I don't know, probably the 50s or 60s, and they try and be like luxurious, and they have these massive like jacuzzi bathtubs like
Yeah,
with just in the room, and it's not.
that's what I was describing. Like that
Yeah,
mad bath.
but that's probably like what you're describing is like an attempt to be luxe, right? Whereas this is
Yeah,
like luxe in a la sort of 2010, 2015, 2020. Whereas like I'm talking like luxe as of like 50s, 60s, and they haven't remodeled or updated these rooms, and so they, yeah, and they still exist, and they just look so
yeah.
bad and tacky.
All right, all right. Hit me with your worst hotel that you've ever been at. The very worst.
I've definitely stayed in some bad hotels, but there is one experience. Like, if I'm going to take like the totality of the experience, and like maybe the hotel was okay, but it was just not a good experience. So, this was actually in Beijing. So we arrived and actually had my son with us. He was like a newborn or 9 months old or something at that time. So what happened is we arrived, got off the plane. It was late at night. You know what it's like, right? You arrive in one of these new destinations, and after a long flight, you just need a good sleep, right? So we arrived after this long flight, and then we arrive in to check in, and then the check-in counter's like, we have this smoking room available for you. Like, well, hang on, no. What do you mean smoking room? We ordered the non-smoking room. And they said, one of our colleagues is sleeping in your room. I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean she's sleeping in our room? Like, oh yeah, your non-smoking room. Yeah, our colleague, she's sleeping in it. Well, first of all, we've got like a 9-month-old child, so we would like the non-smoking room. Thank you very much. Second of all, why the hell do we have one of your colleagues sleeping in our room?
Was there a language barrier or?
Well, no, because my wife actually speaks Mandarin, so not an issue. So yeah, so didn't really have an option but to take the smoking room. And
you took it?
Well, what were we going to do? Like we didn't have a choice, right? So we checked out the next day and said, "Well, fuck you," and we got another hotel the next day. So,
Oh my God. So it's just that kind of lack of customer service, I suppose, right?
I mean, what was obviously frustrating is like no one in China gives a shit that you say you want a non-smoking room because of your 9-month-old child, right? That does not like increase the urgency of like.
Yeah.
So we checked out and we had better hotels on that trip, but yeah, that smoking thing didn't work for us.
That's terrible. I mean, like, also, like, was she planning to sleep there the whole night, or is it just like she's taking a nap on her shift?
Well, I don't know. But I mean, I think we were kind of just to be a bit spiteful, saying, "Well, go wake your fucking colleague up and get her out of our room." Like that was kind of the tone of
Then
it,
you
right?
kind of don't want it.
Yeah, like it's not a nice sort of. Well, okay, wake your colleague up and then go and clean the room, and then we'll go in that room. So, we can't do room service at this. It's just anyway. So it was just sort of like one of those situations.
I'd want to like look the woman in the eye. Like that's what would make me feel better in that situation. I'd be like, I want you to wake up and look at me and just be like, look, like face up to the music.
I think this is like a good segue into like the people side of things, the culture shocks, and we've already talked a little bit about that, but like, yeah, I'm just curious if you what some of your maybe more funny cultural experiences are, misunderstandings, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I'm trying not to pick too many racist examples of Asian travel. So something comes to mind actually that growing up, I went to Malaysia a lot to see relatives, and just the relationship that they have with their service staff, like whether it be your waiters or anyone in the service industry, really, they just treat them. The power dynamic is just the most extreme version of it. In Australia, you don't tend to really treat anyone like different, if you know what I mean. Like if your waiter comes there, or even something as blue collar and seeing like a cleaner or something, everyone's like, it's very egalitarian, I suppose. But in Asian countries and in Malaysia, there's like totally the opposite, right? Like the fact that you have decided to pay 10 ringgit for lunch, you can now they're now your slave, and you can like yell at them as if they are such. It's just like a really weird dynamic, I suppose, that takes a little while getting used to. We often think about it in terms of how people are different from us, but it would be fair to say that a lot of countries experience Australians quite differently to what we think of ourselves. I think that we, as a people, as a nation, have a bit of a reputation, especially when it comes to, obnoxious partying or, party locations like Bali and things like that, or in different parts of Europe. Do you think there's a truth to that in terms of the stereotypical obnoxious Aussie traveler?
There definitely is, but I think it's partially like self-reinforcing in that, like, I know that like Australians almost live up to the stereotype that people from overseas have about Australians. So I do genuinely think if you ask like the average person from not in Australia, well, like maybe America or Europe, what's an Australian like? They'll say, oh yeah, they're gregarious, they're fun, easy, laid back, easygoing, all that sort of stuff, right? So then when Australians go abroad, they play up to that, and they're more laid back and more easygoing, more gregarious than they are even in Australia. So, and I had like a unique insight to this, right? Because I worked in overseas in a bar in Paris, and it happened to be the bar that like the Kentucky tours would take the buses to. So this is in Paris, and like so I'm like an Australian working in this pub in Paris, and then and then I would think, here's another like busload of fucking stupid Aussies, right? But they'd talk to me like they just assume I'm French, right? They'd lay it on, and I say, oh, for fuck's sake. But I could tell like this is actually not how Australians are in Australia.
It's like a caricature of them.
Like I could just pick something up about it that was inauthentic, right? It was like they were trying to be Steve Irwin, you know what I mean? And so I think that's what kind of propagates that a little bit more. But there's one aspect that I'm probably guilty of as well, like in terms of Australians being obnoxious overseas, is like
Bintang singlet.
well, I wasn't going to say that, but like another kind of drink is the whole just can't get a good coffee outside of Sydney or Melbourne. You know, like that whole coffee thing being such like the first thing that an Australian will whinge about. And then not only will they like whinge about it, but then they'll start proselytizing to everyone in those other countries. Oh, you just have to try coffee in Australia. It's just so much. We've just got such a great coffee culture in Australia. It's so hard to get a good coffee over here. You know, it's like like I get it because like it like genuinely it is right. We're used to like milk based coffees, and other countries don't tend to have that same focus on that very specific form of coffee culture. But like at the same time, it's obnoxious.
Well, that's a tough one because I feel like that is actually the truth. And again, I guess you could go on about less, and things have gotten better, but I mean, in Europe it is very, very hard to find a comparable coffee. And I think it's this kind of thing around like it's been elevated in Australia. So it's not just that you can't find something that is similar. You can't find the same importance placed on coffee, I think, in on average, right? Like there's not the same kind of specialization or dedication to it. Even in Italy, where they have espresso bars and things like that, that would be like, you know, a good counterweight to that it's just a different style when they do really care about it. But everywhere else, I think, like I actually found Paris like near impossible to get decent coffee. There's a few kind of like, you know, American or Australian run places, and that was it.
I think it's just that it's like a different coffee culture, right? So our coffee culture is very much around milk based coffee, whereas like say in France, like it's all about like the espresso. It's probably same with Italy, and it's probably also not obsessed over in quite the same way. Like so, you know, it's very common in say Paris to see like little cafes that will sell espresso, and it's also the same place you put your bets on your horses, right? So it's just a different clientele. It's
seen as
serves
like a
different
staple
function
rather than something to be, you know.
Yeah, and in
appreciate.
America, obviously, like the irony is like Americans are really into coffee too. Like when you think about it, like not in the kind of artisan sort of way that I think or it's increasingly it is, but like that whole, you know, like the top up of your filter coffee kind of thing. It's actually a big culture there.
Yeah. But I mean, it's definitely changing. And I think you have hubs that are coffee mad. Like obviously, you know, like Portland, for example, is a massive coffee culture place with so many pour overs everywhere and all this kind of stuff, specialty coffee and stuff. Yeah, I think I like this idea of the whole Kentucky tour, big drinkers kind of stuff. I guess that's definitely a demographic as well, right? Like it's not like boomers leave Australia and suddenly become, you know, party animals. We're really talking about the younger demographic here, right?
But like it has its like extensions, right? Like, you know, like footy club trips to Bali or whatever, right?
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you traveled with kids?
Yes, I do.
And going into it, did you think it would be really that different, or were you very prepared, or did you just kind of, was that first leg a bit of a shock to you?
You know what? Actually, I would say it went pretty successfully because we made sure we got the bassinet on the, you know, like before the bulkhead on the plane. We had the bed. He slept the whole way because, you know, like it's that whole like association with movement or whatever, or the environment even, you know, the odd, like it wasn't out of the ordinary. Like it wasn't like a crying the whole trip sort of thing. How about you?
Well, definitely. The first few kids, it was not travel was just not going to work. It was just a little bit too tricky, and then obviously COVID hit and changed a lot of things. So no, there's not actually the kids haven't traveled that much internationally, right? It's something that I'd like to change, but I have been trapped on planes domestically with some pretty rowdy kids before, and I do remember one time I was stuck on a business trip, and it was one of those frustrating ones where for some reason you're on the tarmac but you can't move, and they don't really tell you why, but you're just stuck there for what seems like an eternity. And this poor little kid was going nuts, like absolutely just like screaming like really loudly in the cabin, and we were just stuck there. We couldn't move, and because the plane wasn't going, the air conditioning wasn't really running properly. It was like blowing that hot stuffy air, and the kid was just losing it. And I remember like going through the roller coaster of emotions, right? Like you kind of like think to yourself, oh, just don't get carried away. It's really annoying. You feel a bit, frustrated, and then you reach a sense of empathy, and then it just goes on for too long, and then you just fucking lose it. And you're like, oh damn, this kid, that's like, it's crazy. And then you come back to empathy again, and I probably went through that cycle like 3 or 4 times, right? It was so long. The guy was like crying for like half an hour, but the guy next to me just lost it. He just like he didn't have kids obviously or something, but he just cracked. Like after probably about like the 15-minute mark, he just like got up and he was just like started pacing down the halls, and then eventually he was just like muttering to himself to begin with, and then he started like yelling out, saying like, why is the kid crying? Like what can you do? And then everyone kind of like just told him to suck it up. And then he started like asking the hostesses of like, I need to get off the plane. I need to get off the plane. And he was kind of losing control. And they're like, so we can't disembark anyone. Like we're on the tarmac. We can't actually get a bridge out. Blah, blah, blah. And he was just going nuts. He's like, no, I do not want to fly anymore. I will need off this. And they ended up like relocating him to another part of the plane or something, or like giving him earplugs or something. And it was just like really intense. I've never seen that kind of thing before.
God, I hope that dude never has kids.
But I mean, I do get it. Like obviously a child crying is a very distressful thing. Like it's actually scientifically proven to raise your cortisol levels. And there's definitely a type of person that would be a combination of not having any empathy for the situation and also probably being biologically psychologically and biologically affected by a kid's crying where they're stressed out, right?
To close this episode out, what's the most obscure or niche travel interest you would have? What would what would you do? Or the most like unexpected place that you'd be interested to go or visit?
Yeah, like I think something that I haven't really spoken to you that much about, but you might know this about me from back in school. I'm quite a big horror buff in a lot of ways, so it does appeal to me to go to places that have haunted histories. So there's like lots of places in the world you can go to, haunted forests, mansions, place of of mass killings and things like that. That or places of the occult that I would kind of be interested in experiencing.
I think something that for me I would be really keen to do like at some point, but there might be even like a times of the essence aspect to it, is to go to North Korea while it's still really fucked up, right?
Oh, so, the petrol clams?
Yeah, do one of those tours where like you go into North Korea and it's like really heavily guarded, and they show you the sights of Pyongyang or whatever and how wonderful like North Korean society is, but like really what you're seeing is this kind of really underwhelming place. But yeah, I'd love to check it out because I just think it would be so fascinating just to see what it's like to...
But do you think you'd see anything there?
Well, I think you'd see enough to kind of get a good feel for the place. But do you obviously see what it's like for the average North Korean? Well, no, of course not. But you'd get a sense of like, what is this place, And it's just such a bizarre part of the world, right? All right, let's call that.
Yeah.
Watch the rest of the football.
Right, man.